Hi, I'm Madeline Johnson. I'm Signup's Content and Community Manager. Welcome back to the Signcast video series. I'm here with Marcus Miller today to do a little bit of a 2024 vibe check for everything digital marketing, local search, SEO. Has seen a ton of changes and developments, everything from some Google updates to, new AI technology. And I can't wait to hear what Marcus has to think about all of it. Marcus, how about you kick us off and tell us a little about yourself? I'd love to hear more about how you got into the industry and what you're doing now.
Yeah, hi, my name's Marcus Miller. I'm the owner and lead strategist at Bowler Hat. We're a digital marketing agency in central Birmingham. I got started in this industry. I did a computer science degree. Started working in around 1999. I was working for a company at the time who was selling kind of early mobile phone data cables. So but obviously there was no Shopify or anything then. We built the system, we built the order processing systems, we built the payment systems. So I was kind of a developer, really, more so than a marketer at that point. We were also, if you remember, you may be a little bit young, the early ringtones that would be sort of, you deliver over the air to people's phones, and these sort of two-tone ringtones. We had ringtone sites as well. So, but after a year or so, once the development was done, the question kind of became, well, how do we get more customers? Mm-hmm. And that I just fell down the Google rabbit hole at that point, fell into SEO. Obviously, I had the technical background, and so I was kind of well suited for the more technical aspect of SEO, particularly early SEO. Right. And I mean, funnily enough, when I'd been a few years prior to that, I'd arranged kind of like LAN parties where everybody brings their computer together to play like video games, and we'd kind of marketed those online. I'd marketed those online. So I'd also inadvertently done some marketing when I was younger in different jobs that I'd done. So I fell into it, or fell down that Google rabbit hole, which at the time was just super interesting. Obviously, it was a very, very different environment back then. There was lots of things that you could do, which it was quite easy to manipulate Google search results back in the day, ultimately. So I kind of become fascinated with that. But I also at the same time kind of become aware of the kind of like the white hat and the black hat kind of ethical aspect, and always leaned a little bit more into the kind of ethical side of things anyway. And obviously, you're talking early days, really. So I was around in 2003 for the first big kind of spam update that Google dropped, that wiped out loads of people's businesses. And I was kind of became aware of, the real world impact that some of these games that you could play could potentially have on business, So I think my exposure to all of that stuff very early on kind of always pushed me more down this kind of, ethical kind of route, and trying to do things the right way, which isn't always the easy way, but it's the sustainable way, unfortunately.
Right.
And then I worked for various of the companies. I consulted for a bit, and around, some fairly big companies, banks and things like that. And eventually, when I got kind of tired of kind of, going up and down the country, and when I had my kids initially, I just set up my own agency in central Birmingham, and we've been doing it ever since.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like that's a very common story of different like digital marketing professionals that I've spoken to, is that they started getting into the space because they were working for a different business or like had a different mission and wanted to get visibility for that, and then sort of found out, oh, this is a whole world. There's all these different things you can do. And I feel like do you feel like back then it was sort of easier to get started with everything? Like obviously so much has changed, and it's the pros that have been around, I feel like, have a bit of a leg up perhaps, but do you feel like it's gotten easier, harder?
Maybe it's different. I think if you have a naturally, Google has always been this kind of black box, and I think it attracts a certain kind of thinker, someone who really wants to kind of, you know, dig into things and try and figure things out. So if you're a, you know, kind of, if you have a problem kind of solving mind and you really like to dig into things and, you know, kind of turn over stones and stuff and experiment and play and tinker, then yeah, I think it was fairly easy to get into Google stuff back then. And I think as well, having the development background, I was kind of a web developer. I did my whole dissertation on like open source versus closed source web technologies. I was able to spin up these kind of experiments really quickly, you see, and I had a couple of my own kind of hobby sites and sites I was helping friends do. So I had this kind of quite a broad network of different things that we were playing with quite early. So you know, you could learn really, really quickly. Obviously, I remember when Google Ads launched, and it was just a single ad at the top of the page of 10 blue links, you know. And again, we were just, I was just there, kind of really just fortunately placed, I guess, to play around with all of that. And yeah, it's so is it? What was your question? Sorry, is it easier now? I think it's harder now because I think it's more. I think there's more to it, and I think there's so many platforms and so many ad types and so many different tactics, and there's so much going on now. It's like, well, where do you become a generalist, more of a kind of, you know, a marketer? Do you become a specialist in a specific, you know, a given tactic? Is a lot of that kind of stuff probably going away because things are becoming more automated and driven by signals? I actually have a 19-year-old daughter who's at university, an 18-year-old son who I imagined was following me in this direction, but has actually gone in a completely different direction. I just thinking about where they are and trying to decide what you would do and looking at all the things that potentially AI might make trounce down the road. I think it's actually, I've just talked myself into it being way harder now. I think it was a simpler world 20 years ago, maybe. I think it's complicated now. I think and you know, it's like of all my good friends that work in various jobs, none of them do what they did at university. So I think, you know, it's very hard to, I think you've got to look at something and say, I'm interested in that, and have a go at it and see how you get on. And probably while you're going in that direction, you're going to find another like pathway and be like, oh, well, that's interesting. And you kind of weave your way through it. I mean, you know, my focus at the moment, like, we're much more focused on traditional kind of marketing strategy, and, you know, the more underlying kind of marketing stuff, the stuff that's been around and stood the test of time, that, you know, the the tactics are, you know, they're always going to be changing, but if you can get the strategy bit right, then the tactics get easier. So yeah, it's a complicated environment, and it's obviously, it's not like the pace of change is slowing down. It's obviously changing all the time. So I don't know, if you get into this industry, you've just got to enjoy experimenting. You've just got to enjoy playing around and testing things, and, you know, you've got to try and apply some kind of scientific rigor to that. But, you know, at the same time, you've got to be kind of curious and enjoy the challenge.
No, I think that's definitely right. Google is a place for the curious, and a place for the perpetual tinkerers, like people who
Yes.
people who don't just want to have one cut and dry thing that they do and do it forever. Like, yeah, like obviously you're one of those people. You've been in the space for a long time, and you've, you know, continuously tinkering. Now that you I'm curious, now that you have like an agency and you're on, you know, in charge of, or part of the person like who directs strategy for your agency, how does the experimentation change as you're on a bigger team? And working with more people? Would you say that it's like, are you still tinkering as much as you would, or how does the strategy change as you sort of get into the agency mindset?
Yeah, obviously people, some of what people pay us for is to form as good a hypothesis about what tactics we will be trialing or whatever we will be doing for their marketing so we don't just do that through trial and error with their money.
Right.
So I guess, it's more a case of, we have to look at what we know has worked and what we know has worked for similar businesses, or what tactics we know can deliver in a certain situation. And so we have our own kind of marketing methodology that we call REP, which is, it's kind of the research bit and the situation analysis and looking at the competitors and the customers, and does the business have a good enough strategy to stand out from the crowd? The E bit is the engagement, and that will be the platforms that we look at and the messages and how we segment everything up. And the P bit is the persuasion piece. How do we kind of generate leads? How do we nurture people? How do we, so the first thing that we always do, and what I'm mostly involved in, is the kind of this initial marketing plan aspect. So we'll look at the business and we'll figure out what we think that they should be doing, and we'll document it all into a plan. And then at least when we, start to tinker and play around with different things and different tactics, we've kind of posed this idea, and we've talked about it a lot with the customer, and we've invited them to criticize it. So the ideas are as good as possible before we actually start the work, because obviously, these platforms, they're expensive, and whatever you do is expensive from either a time or lost time or the costs that you spend. So I guess for me personally, it's become more about my experience and using my experience to help people, and working more on the kind of the planning side of things, and just that's where I'm most useful at this point, I think. And the obviously there's a lot more platforms nowadays than there were, and even Google Ads has all these different kinds of ad formats, and Google Analytics 4, and all of these different things that are out there. You can't be an expert in everything, but even if you try a tactic or a platform that you haven't used before, if that tactic is built upon top of a solid strategy, then it's much more likely to work. So there is still a lot of tinkering. There's a lot of things I'd like to play with more. It's all moving pretty quickly. It's still interesting.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, you can't exactly experiment when you're dealing with a client's money and a client's platform. So that makes sense.
Well, I mean, to some extent, some of what they pay us to do is to experiment. Is in we're spending X here and getting Y back. Well, if we spent the same over here, would we get more? Would we get less? Can we do something different? Can we get more of a bigger slice of the action? So there is always an experimental aspect to it, and it does come back to almost this kind of scientific way of thinking that well, this is our hypothesis, and let's do a little experiment here, and does it work? And can we then reproduce that and scale it up? And does it still work? And trying to figure out what works for people, and because what works today might not work tomorrow, and that kind of that's across the business. They may have new competitors. They may there's just the business strategy that worked for them yesterday may not work today. Their positioning may not be good enough. It's there's a lot of moving parts. It's all got to slot together. So yeah, we're still it's a bigger, more complicated problem than it used to be. Of just if you can get to the top of Google, everything will be okay. That's unfortunately not the way it works anymore.
If that was the problem then, like if you can get to the top of Google, then everything will be okay. What would you say is the problem statement now?
It's a more fundamental marketing challenge of standing out from the crowd and having something unique to offer. You have to be offering something that's, your business has to stand up. If you're just another provider of just a generic service, that someone can go and get from anyone else, and all you're doing is just trying to kind of buy clicks or buy individual sales or whatever, then it's tough out there. It's particularly with the way the economy's been for the last sort of 4 years. It's almost like a game of attrition at the moment. Only the strong will survive this period of time. So yeah, I think the last 20 odd years has essentially been like a technological arms race from a marketing perspective. So people have been, if you could get this website built quick enough, if you could, solve this technological kind of marketing problem, if you could get to the top of Google, if you could, whatever it may, if you could understand these new tactical program platforms, then you could get a lot of exposure and you could do okay. But everybody's figured it out now. So,
Right.
it's never been, I don't think marketing's ever been more competitive. It's never been easier to kind of, your competitors, not round the corner. They're a few pixels away. It's, and hundreds of competitors are. And even, your competitor isn't even, if you're selling something on Google, now your competitor's probably Google as well, as or it's the ads, or it's organic, or it's your competitors, or it's the content, or it's the people that provide alternatives to what you sell. I mean, it's like, it's brutal out there. So what makes a difference for people is the more fundamental kind of strategic, so we'll often go back to people and talk. And I think a problem a lot of smaller businesses have is that they do have things that make them truly unique and interesting and valuable, and things that they do, whether it just comes down to kind of a service-led thing or whatever it may be, but they don't tend to communicate them very well. So we try to have this kind of almost, the purpose of the rep process is so that we have this kind of procedural way to work through things. And it pulls in all of these things that I've used over the years that I think are good, like Race from Smart Insights and SOSTAC and, hundreds of marketing books, even classic marketing books from the 70s on like positioning and, all sorts. It pulls in all of this stuff so that we can kind of step through things with people in a kind of, in a kind of procedural way and hopefully draw out of them the things that they do different, so we can communicate that better to the people that, they're trying to get in front of. So it's, we do so much more stuff now that it's like, it's like whatever little tweak you do on Google to gain a few places probably isn't as powerful as communicating what you do more clearly or having a reason to stand out, or just they're often little things. I needed some, we've got a log burner in our house, and I was looking for, I bought some wood and he's very good, and I was looking for some new wood, and I was looking on various kind of competitor websites, and they all show the piles of wood as like a pallet. And I've bought one of these pallets before, and you think it's going to be a huge pallet, and it's actually quite a small box. Well, this website, in their ads, and their Google Shopping ads, had a lady standing next to the pallet to give a sense of scale, so you knew what you were getting. So I clicked on that, and then when I went to their website, I'm not quite ready to buy yet because we've still got some wood in the shed. They had their newsletter was there, and it was like, join our newsletter and we will plant a tree. So I was like, okay, well, that's lovely. So I'm going to join your newsletter. And then the next day I got an email through with a discount code, and it was already pretty fairly, so there was this, the initial picture grabbed, there was kind of trust and a sense of scale there. So that got me to click. And then there was this lovely little soft call to action. And then there was, this offer code. So they had they had the flow kind of put together and the steps, so it's like, I'm always an observer of good marketing. If I see these things on other businesses, I'm like, wow, that's cute. So, but this is the point. You can talk about things like strategy and people needing to get their messaging right and their positioning right and things like that, and it's right. But that doesn't always have to be complicated. It can also be done in quite a kind of simple, non-complicated way. So, often what we find, the things that make the bigger difference at the moment are these kind of more strategic changes, the positioning, the messaging that we're putting across to people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like Yeah, I feel like since there are, as you said, so many competitors that are just a few pixels away. I love that
Yeah.
phrase you used.
Yeah.
Like you have to have, when you look at two things side by side, you have to have something that makes you stand out. Like, just because you're ranked 5th or 3rd on Google doesn't mean that somebody's going to say, "Oh, like, I want this wood palette instead of that would palette," like, when there's no fundamental difference in the way that you're
Yeah.
messaging or marketing. So I like that more holistic view. I do think that makes more sense, because as like the consumer, the searcher sees everything all at once, instead
Yeah.
of just walking down the street and seeing, "Oh, this place sells wood, I need wood, I'll come back when I need some," unless I find a different place, and they'll probably come back.
Yeah, and that's that proximity element's gone, isn't it? And there's no personal element because you're not talking to someone. It's not like you're building a relationship with that, with that person. It's really it just comes down to this brutal, just price and value differentiation, and it's just, you're just going to buy from whoever's cheapest or can give you what you want in the quickest way, or that you trust. You don't, you still, if you want to have a successful long-term business and benefit from digital, acquiring customers through digital, you've still got to try and build a relationship with people. But you don't do that anymore by sort of welcoming them as they walk into your shop or office. You have to do it through email and the social posts and videos or whatever else it is that you do to build that relationship. But if you don't do that, then that's just at your peril, because
Right.
if you're just trying to just acquire customers through whatever tactic it is, it's expensive. It's a difficult way to do things, particularly when things are tough like they are now. I mean, we're working with a company at the moment that is first organically first for all of their major keywords, and they get between 5% and 10% of the clicks for those specific terms. That's because the shopping ads are above them, and all of those clicks go to shopping. So obviously it changes across all verticals or whatever it may be, but it's they've strived for that goal for a long time, and they've kind of got there, and it hasn't delivered what they hoped it would. And again, that's another problem that we see, and I think is a distillation of the complexity of the environment, is that people will often focus doggedly on one tactic, or even worse, one keyword or something, and think, if we just had that keyword, if we just ranked first for that, if we could just, or if we were just at the top of Google for our main products or whatever, then everything would be okay. And it just isn't that easy for lots and lots of different reasons. And that kind of, magic bullet thinking, it's just, you have to try and just kind of clear out all of your biases and look at it from the perspective of your customer and think, okay, what's going to work here? And, I just had a meeting before this call, and that business spends a lot of money on Facebook to acquire new customers, and they're quite successful. I mean, it probably costs them about 50% of the sale to acquire a customer by Facebook, which isn't great, but they have a great lifetime value. That customer will come back to and buy other things over the next 5 to 7 years, because they're a fairly unique business. So they can take the pain there. They can suck that up. But a lot of smaller businesses that are reliant on just single sales, they can't. They need to introduce other elements to their marketing to keep people coming back. So not to acquire a sale, but to acquire a customer, and just nurture that customer over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like the emphasis that you're putting on, like, the need for a more holistic strategy, because it is true, when someone's looking for something, there's not just one holy grail keyword or one like golden strategy. If you're not doing it in a holistic way, the customer will forget about you, because sometimes they search for something and they click on the first result and they buy it, but very often that's not what people do. They'll look on different channels, they'll do more research, they'll think about it, they'll search something else later, they'll do any number of things. So if you don't sort of attack from multiple angles, they'll just get away.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So when you're advising your clients and like thinking about a strategy, how does that work at your agency? Do you sort of do you guys do all of the work of saying this is what you should do and we'll execute it, or do you say this is what you should do, this is what we can do to help, and then you should also do these other things as well?
A bit of both, because obviously we don't do everything. We do, because we do this kind of this planning. We do this kind of situation analysis piece first, where we'll look at their, business and their marketing, and look at the marketplace and their competitors, and then we'll try and figure out, who are their customers, and why are they looking for whatever it is that you provide, and how do they buy, and then we'd probably come up with the different segments. And then we'd figure out what the kind of, the messages are for those individual segments, and the tactics are for those individual, segments. And, so we try to do that without any bias at all with regards to what the right answer is.
Right.
I mean, so we spoke to, and I was speaking to a business yesterday, and they'd been somewhere, and the agency that they'd spoke to just before us had tried to insist that the answer to their problems was Google Shopping. I mean, it categorically isn't, but they decided on the solution before the customer had almost, walked through the door to have a meeting. It's the wrong way to do it. We try and look at it and say, we think this is where, do the research, figure out a plan, and then whether that's things that, so for instance, if buying a kitchen online, you may have two types of customer. You would have, we're in the market for a new kitchen at the moment, and it's very much driven by my wife, because I am just there to just, do as I'm told. She's deciding what we want and how it will look and everything else. So she's really, shopping for that kitchen. And my wife, Emma, she wouldn't even, I don't think she would even go onto Google. She would just be on Instagram. She'd start on Instagram. She'd search on Instagram. She'd look at things on there, and that's how she'd find people. Now, another angle, another kind of customer segment for if you were doing that would be like a more engineer type, typically, probably maybe me, or, and that person is probably going to start on Google. They're going to look at really the specifics of how the cabinets are made and the thickness and the quality. You have two different types of customer there. It's the same product, but the way that they'd approach it, the things you have to say to them, the platforms that you'll get in front of them on, they're completely different. So we have to map all of that out and determine, make sure the messaging and the platforms and everything else is all, it supports all of that. And it's probably a separate approach for each of those customer segments. And, say for instance, I don't know, Reddit or Pinterest or something came up in that, and we found that would be a useful segment. Well, we don't offer those services. So, we might suggest that, another agency or a partner or something else. We will always suggest what we believe is the best approach, whether that's something we can do, whether it's something the business needs to do themselves. The social piece is always important, but at the same time, it also needs a really authentic voice to deliver that. So, it's not just like we're just, you might say, the cynic would say that you just generate those posts using, AI now. But
yeah.
I don't really believe that is the case. That, So yeah, we're very much about figuring out what is the right way to tackle this problem for this customer. And that's, so, another part of that is, before we even get into any of that kind of customer research, or the research and the market research and the customer research, is, we're very, very clear about their goals. We use like kind of SMART goals. We kind of, have hierarchical goals. We'll figure out things they want to avoid, and just having these we're very much about conversation, very much about sitting down and talking it through, because I think people think while they talk, and by having those kind of detailed conversations, we can really map this out. And by the end of it, hopefully we have a really, really good plan that can be, you know, bounced around all the various stakeholders and people. Everyone can add their kind of feedback or input to that. And then so when we do, you know, go ahead and run any ads or any campaigns or whatever it may be, at least it's had a really good amount of thought put into it, and it's, you know, it's been, and hopefully those ideas and suggestions and things have been criticized so that only the really strong ones that we can't knock over remain, you know. And that's, I think that just diving in at a tactical level is it has its merit, doesn't it? There's sometimes, you know, that is the right thing to do, but generally with the kind of mid-range, a lot of the businesses we work with, they really need to figure it all out. So we've got a really solid plan to work to. You know, that's I can't remember what the question was. I think I went off on a tangent.
No, the tangent was great. The tangent was great. No, it's helpful to know, you know, how you approach this with this more holistic approach, sort of breaking down the strategy, finding out what's going to work for each specific business, because, you know, like things are changing. Not every person is going to search for a new kitchen in the same type of way. And even when you look on Google, you know, there's results from Reddit, there's results from Pinterest, there's results from everywhere. And you can, you know, search using an AI powered search engine, and you can ask ChatGPT for recommendations for a new kitchen. Like there's so many different things that you can do, and like the user experience is really changing. But it seems like you have a really great grasp on how it's changing and sort of how to still think about it with the same tactician mind while acknowledging all the new changes that are happening in the different ways that people are searching. So that's awesome.
It's always fascinating. We sat down with someone this morning, and it's a really interesting business. They make like leather armor for people who play kind of live action role playing, you know, and this stuff, it's amazing. I mean,
yeah,
it's like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it looks like stuff out of Lord of the Rings, but he runs his entire business on social media, but his big competitors are all on search. But if you search around all of these different keywords, it's just pure video, you know, it's just pure video pulled from YouTube. You've got an initial video with the kind of, you know, chapter points there, then you've got 3 other videos under that, then you've got people also asked, then you've got people's YouTube channels, you know. So it's like within moments we can determine that you know, video is probably a very important part of his approach, even if, you know, and those videos are probably fed from, you know, even without it being a specific YouTube strategy, the search strategy has to consider video, you know. So it's getting into the mind of the customer and the customer's customer, and thinking how they would go about, you know, these kind of like, you know, who are they, why are they looking for this, what you know, and how would they go about that, you know. You kind of then you get into their shoes and you step through the process, and it almost maps itself out if you follow things through in this kind of, you know, kind of structured but sort of procedural way.
Yeah, that makes sense, because depending on the item, the service that you're selling, like someone will be looking for it in a different way, or want to, you know, do research about it in a different way. Like for the leather armor, you want to see it in action, make sure it moves well, looks good. But you know, for something like, I don't know, so something like a new kitchen, you just want to see it as a kitchen.
Yeah, and there's, you know, obviously then you've got the leather on thing could be, they might buy the product, or they can buy the courses or whatever it may be. But then kitchens, some people sell kitchens online, some people have showrooms, so there can be this local angle to it. So it's like, you know, not all competitors, are equal, you know. So, and then if you're looking at local people, or even like kitchen fitters or whatever it may be, then we have obviously a much more traditional kind of local search approach, where the reviews are super important, your reputation's important, and, you know, it's you really have to fine tune it to the needs of the business and the environment in which that business is kind of operating. You know,
Right.
it's you just got to do the research, and you've got to build a plan. You know, like professionals use plans. Houses are built to plans. You know, planes have a flight plan. You know, it's like you just have to have a doctor has a treatment plan. If you haven't got a plan, then you really are just sort of stumbling around in the dark. It's that's not good.
Right. So when you have a client or prospective client that is part of an industry that or has a product that you have just had no experience with, like for instance the leather armor, or someone's making chainmail for lizards, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like like how besides doing some rudimentary research, what's the process like for figuring out a strategy for what they should do?
Yeah, it's exactly the same, really. I mean, as I've just explained, I mean, obviously, if they are a more traditional business that would typically have featured in the yellow pages, back when you had the books or whatever, or they're a local type business, well, then, we have more of a kind of strategic template of how we know what things are important. When it's a less traditional business, like you say, whether it's armor or we're working with someone or talking to someone yesterday that's it's a pharmaceutical kind of industry, well, then that's where this customer research, the part of the rep process, the customer research part, is really, really important, because we just have to map out those personas, figure out who they are, why they're looking, what are the problems, what are they hoping to achieve, what jobs do they have to do before they can figure this out. How would they look? What would they search? What platforms might they use? We have to just really kind of like, model that potential customer or customer segment, and then go through all the ways in which they may, look for something, and then see what it looks like out there, and then we can figure out all of the potential options from there. Usually if you step through that's fairly standard, kind of marketing persona process, and can answer those kind of who, why, and how type questions, then it kind of presents itself. And again, talking to people within the business, talking to the salespeople within the business is always useful. Talking to the owner, sitting down, just figuring it out, just looking on the computer and or your phone or on whatever it may be, and seeing what that journey looks like, and then we can figure out what all the various platforms are, and then we can figure out how competitive they are, and then we can decide what the right approach is.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, just sort of, do the research, do the work, figure out.
Exactly.
Figure out the background. Yeah, that makes total sense. Sort of pivoting a little bit. I am wondering about, there's been a ton of changes to search, particularly with people using AI to help them search, or using like different tools to sort of help them do SEO, or rank higher in search. And I'm curious if you have had any experience with that, or what your thoughts are on it so far. I know it's sort of newer this last year, and some people are more have dove headfirst into it, and some people are apprehensive but learning, and lots of different thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't tend to think that anything has changed radically yet. I think that the whole AI piece, I mean, I tend to have paid for ChatGPT account open all day, and I use it for different things, and I can ask it questions. I don't really see it as a replacement. I see it as more of a kind of, it's an alternative. There's some things that I would use Google for, and there's some things that I'd use ChatGPT for, or whatever it may be. And I guess I was doing my younger son, he's 12, doing his maths homework with him, and despite supposedly being good at maths many moons ago, I found his homework bewildering. And trying to ask Google a question, all I got was loads of PDFs and videos and things. Where if I plugged that into ChatGPT, I just got the step-by-step instructions, and it was just a much more concise answer. but that's going to come to Google anyway, isn't it, with the search generative experience? But I think it is a new tool, and I think it is, really, really useful. But again, I was in a meeting with a customer a few weeks back, and we were kind of wireframing their new website, and we wrote a load of different kind of headlines, and some of them, when it was on mobile, they were too long, really. So we were able to just there and then kick that into ChatGPT, give me 10 variations on that at only 6 words or whatever, and we've got them there, and then we can kind of play with it real time. So I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's a completely amazing tool. It's in theory it's a game changer, but I haven't seen it make major inroads into how. I haven't seen it change what we do radically. I tend to use it more of a kind of like an intelligent assistant rather than to do things for us. I think we were contacted by a company that's selling a automated AI SEO tool that will it connects to your blog, and it will generate like the titles, and it will upload 10 posts for you every week, or whatever it is, whatever frequency you want to go for, and completely apparently automate your SEO is the strap
right.
Yet they're contacting SEO agencies to help them with their SEO, so that it doesn't really add up. It's and of course Google's on top of that, and some of these other changes we've seen this year in search that are helpful content, all of these kind of user review signals and everything else. It's almost like Google's kind of laying the groundwork to say, well, when we bring our AI system in, we're going to have everything you have, but then a whole lot more, all of these real kind of signals to pull things together. So I think it's super exciting. And I don't think there's been massive change. Really, obviously I'm looking at search from this kind of almost 25-year kind of like window, and I just tend to see it as this really gradual evolution. I mean, if you look at Google now versus 15 years ago, it's a completely different thing. But with regards to changes last year, I just think that the last couple of years, they're more, subtle. It's a subtle evolution, that I think ultimately, the biggest change over the last 10 years is just the dominance of the ads and just how many of the clicks the ads take away now. And then, what's I think particularly scary for some businesses is the search generative experience piece. I think if you're we did an audit for one company actually that lost 80 to 80% of their search traffic overnight after, I think it was the helpful content update. I'm pretty sure it was. And what we really found was that although they were targeting kind of university students and writing, not bad articles, but things that could be found in lots of other places. So say, for instance, they may write an article about a city, Birmingham, where we're based, about the best nightclubs in Birmingham. What it seemed that happened was that their article went down, even though it might have been a bit better, longer, more comprehensive article, but maybe local newspapers article went up. So, Google seemed to kind of preferentially prefer after that people who had some kind of local credibility or in that industry, or rather than these kind of generic news type source sites. So, well, I say I don't think for the majority of people things have changed radically. I think for a small subset of people or strategies or businesses, and that business was really focused on selling ad space based on the impressions they get to their site, or the traffic they get to their site. I mean, it's an extinction level event for them. It's like they have to fundamentally change their entire strategy, because if their primary traffic acquisition, where it was nearly all organic search, and you know, the way they were doing things isn't going to work anymore, and that's going to get worse. That's just from their for content update that's prioritizing things. If Google starts to answer those questions directly by pulling in multiple sources, you know, with a kind of search, you know, generated AI generated answer, well then yeah, scary times for some people. But even any business that has like upper funnel content marketing that provides a lot of their traffic is you know, needs to just be mindful and just keep a close eye on just how things you know, proceed. It's very curious, it's very interesting time, isn't it? Because Google's got to be careful not to shoot themselves in the foot. They've still got to provide, you know, primarily from generating clicks from their ads. That's still, you know, 99% of their business. So I don't know. It's interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not embedded in a way that you have to expand things and, you know, engage with it or whatever, you know, so that I don't know. We'll see how it'll be. Keep an eye on.
I will keep an eye on things for sure. I think that's very true what you said about the changes over the past few years or the past, you know, 20 years. It's subtle. Things don't happen that quickly, especially with Google. They roll out things slowly, and there are some changes that happen to make a really big impact. So I do feel like they can be, when people talk about them online, like on Twitter/X, they'll be like, oh, like this is a crazy update, but it's just a certain type of website that's being hit, or, you know, and it's all sort of gearing up for this more like, how can we make the search results trustworthy, especially in the age of when people are, you know, like anybody can write anything online. And
expert status, so they need to have this way to anchor into people who are legitimate experts, and you know, and I think that's really, really important, because you know, otherwise Google search will just become even more littered with garbage, you know, and just stuff that isn't, you know, it's, whenever you see these updates, these big updates over time, you know, obviously there's a small set of people that have, you know, the majority of the impact from that. And whether that's, you know, going back to things like Penguin, and it was like link building issues, or Panda and the kind of duplicate content things, these were all people that had found kind of loopholes, and, you know, with having better results than they should have, because they were manipulating the system to some extent. Now, I have a lot of sympathy for people in that situation, particularly if, you know, you're a small business and you've gone to an agency and what they're doing is working and generating you more traffic, and you just keep throwing money at them, but they're kind of not doing what, you know, following the, you know, the guidelines, and then you suddenly get that impact. I mean, I don't see that Google has any choice in implementing those kind of changes and updates. However, there's a lot of kind of collateral damage to this. So, you know, this, you know, I've sat in, you know, it all comes together there, doesn't it? It's like, you know, this kind of magic bullet thinking, you know, I've seen that a lot over the years in relation to SEO. And now we see it a lot in relation to AI, that AI is going to be the problem. It's going to be the thing that solves everybody's whatever problems, you know, overnight. I sat recently in a meeting with with a, you know, fairly big company in the UK, and they had some AI consultants who were basically, the pitch they were making was that, you know, automate all of this content on a large scale, and just, you know, be pushing out all of this automated content. And just I was there to kind of, you know, sort of say whether I thought that was a good idea or a bad idea. And just, you know, I think it's a bad idea. I think you know, you can, if a human who knows what he's talking about uses AI to help him, it's like having almost like a graduate research assistant, you know, uses that tool to help them do something that they would have been able to do, that's better than they would have been able to do without that tool, then that's amazing. That's a great way to use that tool. If you are just thinking you can just spit a topic into that tool, let it generate articles and just pump them out with no editorial review or whatsoever, then I think you're a fool.
Right.
Just that approach, and we've seen this time and time again, and there's obviously some kind of like human nature, psychology elements to all of this, in like the path of least resistance, or, you know, more is better. So a lot of more is better in SEO. It doesn't never sort of stands up over time. You know, it's, you know, you need to look at it as a tool to help you do better, rather than a tool that will just do everything for you. In most cases, particularly for marketing and particularly for Google, because they're looking for all of these user signals, you know, you know, but we're seeing the importance of, even in local search, the importance of reviews across the kind of the area that you kind of, you know, cover is more important than ever. It's, you know, it's always the basics done well, you know. People, again, it's like a human nature thing to look for a shortcut, to look for that secret thing that will fix everything or make everything easier. But that shortcuts, you know, in marketing, there, you know, they rarely work out over the long, you know, long stretch of time. So it's tough. I mean, I get it, you know, it's difficult, but I always kind of just, I don't know. I'm never very excited by the new latest fad or trend or whatever it is. I always just think, okay, it's something else. It probably has utility, but it needs to be woven into the overall fabric of everything else. If you just jump from, you know, one shiny thing to the next new shiny thing, I just think you won't make much progress. And if the underlying thing that you're trying to promote isn't truly amazing, well, you're just wasting your time anyway. So, you know, it's yeah.
No, I definitely agree. I like that mindset, because it is true. If your overall strategy is just based on, oh, here's this new technology, or here's this new update, let me change my whole plan around this, you know, whatever's new is bound to change. Whereas, as you've probably seen, there are sort of these fundamentals of marketing and digital marketing that have been holding true for years, and a new fix-all technology isn't gonna change that in 1 month, in 1 year, in 2 years.
There's a fab book from, I think it's like the 60s or something, the 27 immutable laws of marketing. And it's like, I'll give it to clients and I'll say this book was written in like 1967 or something, you know, and it's, you know, it's staggering. There's not many small business owners that don't read these rules and just think, that's exactly us, you know, that's our problem. We have that problem now. And so, because it's so detached from the technological, you know, world that we live in now, it's a real good kind of like reset. It's so easy to get lost in the tactics and the tools and the platforms, and at the moment, you know, they're so complicated. You know, this is why it's when I say there's been this like technological arms race, you know, but these are all the tactics, and then people have focused on all these different tactics so much that they've almost forgot about the strategy. And I think we've almost come sort of full circle with that now. Everybody is online, even the industries that you know, that were slow to adopt to there now. Everybody's there. If you're not doing everything properly, it won't work. You know, if you haven't got your strategy right, you can mess around with as many tactics as you want. It's just all going to, you know, work badly, if at all. You know, but if you have a good strategy, you know, you can implement the tactics. You'll get better results having a good strategy and poorly implemented tactics than you will with perfectly implemented tactics and no strategy. You know, so you can, you know, if you look at the people who do well on things like YouTube or social media or Instagram or whatever, they tend to be really passionate subject matter experts. Out the platform over time, you know, that's doable. But this idea that you can use AI and just suddenly, you know, kind of fake it till you make it, I think is yeah, it's not going to work out, particularly not from a search perspective.
It's tough. I'm noticing that we're almost out of time, so maybe I'll just ask one last quick question to sum everything up, and then we'll say goodbye. So, like, given everything that we've discussed today, do you have any advice for other digital marketers on how to think about like search as things change, and how to think about new technologies and how much heed to pay to them, I guess?
I think just focus. If you make sure that you've got like the business itself that you're working for, promoting has got a good kind of strategy. Make sure that their messaging and everything is perfectly dialed in. Don't be too distracted by new shiny things. Of course, pay attention to them. The majority of people in our office, they've all got ChatGPT open, and we use it all day, every day. We don't use it to do our jobs for us. We use it to help us do our jobs. I think you've just got to keep a really close eye on things, and you've just got to be working from a plan. It's so important to have a plan because there's so many things going on, and it's so easy to just be on, the hamster wheel, doing things that are generating very little in return, and you're not measuring things, and you don't really know what's working. If you have a good structured plan, and you review and revise that plan, every 3 months or 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is, and then factor in new tactics and new strategies, then, but ensure that you know what you're trying to achieve, how you're trying to measure it, and that when you are experimenting necessarily with new things, that you can ensure that, measure it accurately and make sure it's working and adding value.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that advice, and for this whole conversation has been amazing. So many like great insights from a master tactician with many years of experience.
Lots of years of experience. Many years painful.
Oh, thank you so much, Marcus. This is great.
Pleasure. Great to meet you. Take care.
Bye.